don't think it's going that well. Dark bleatings, everyone. I'm back with my second video in my trying to read 63 books in a month series, and I gotta say, I didn't actually calculate how many books I needed to read a week through the month to achieve this, but I don't think I'm on target. I last left you and I had read 15 books, but only 13 of those were my review requests. So I'm trying to read all of the rest of my review requests for Happy Go Horror by the end of May, and I had 63 books at the beginning of this month, and on my last video I had read 13 of them, so I had 50 left, and I have in the last week read 5 of more, and I'm halfway through another, which is really good. So that brings me up to 19 out of 63 read, which means I've got 44 left and a fortnight to do it, about 14 days. So we'll see, won't we? I'm hoping that a few of those are novellas, really short novellas. Maybe I could, bang them out really fast. So what have we read in the last week? Well, 5 books, which, by normal standards, that's pretty good for me. I am 21 books into my Read What You Own challenge, which is to read 100 books that I already own before I buy any more. It's really hard to not buy any more books. I've had to stop myself. I do have my Abominable Book Club box arriving at some point this week, I think, though, so that doesn't count because that's a subscription box. So I guess. Anyway, what have I read in the last 7 days? Well, first up, Mother Death by Paul O'Neill, which is a scary supernatural novel. I really enjoyed this one too, but Mother Death is about a mother and son circus act, Harold and his mum Dottie, and the circus act is that Harold dies on stage, like in really horrible, violent, graphic ways, but then he's not dead and he can perform again the next time. Or is he dead? Or is he dying? Is he coming back to life? As the title suggests, Mother Death, Dottie, the mum, is able to bring him back. That's not a spoiler, that's like right at the beginning of the book, so that's where it's about. So Harold actually offs himself in some horrible way during these acts, and then he does this because Dottie is able to bring him back. The story is really fun, and well, I say that it started as really fun, and then the further I went into it, the deeper it got, and then at some point I started to feel really bummed out because it felt like, I don't know, it felt like a story about processing or the inability to process some quite deep serious trauma, and it got quite sad and stressful to read in places. I really felt for Dottie, really felt for Harold. Dottie had a lot of guilt because she thinks that she was a really crap mum, and by some of the standards that she mentions herself, she did let Harold down in a few ways. So now she's really committed to trying to be a great mum with the time that she has left, and Harold is just all mixed up and he's got a whole bunch of stuff. So every time he dies, he goes somewhere and sees a particular someone or something that wants to come back with him. So there's a whole lot of supernatural spooky shenanigans going on there. I thought the characters were really good and I was really invested right from the start to the end. So I would recommend that one to fans of sort of scary death, spooky stuff. Those were some words I said to describe the book. Next, I read a book called Withered, another novel by A.G.A. Wilmot, which is about this teenager called Ellis that moves to a new home with their mum, whose name I do not remember off the top of my head right now. But they've moved to this town, into this house, and everyone else in the town keeps insisting that this house is haunted and that there are scary things going on there, which initially Alice writes off as just people trying to freak them out and things like that, but the longer they spend in the house, the more they start to see. There's a little bit of a sort of burgeoning love story in this. I guess I would describe it as kind of a coming of age story in the classic horror sense that we've got a youth dealing with some pretty weird circumstances, like witches happening to them in their formative years. It was kind of like sort of like a mini Scooby-Doo kind of thing. I describe it as, like, not as childish as Scooby-Doo, but that kind of feel. Like it felt like it could be a Buffy plot. It wasn't one of my favourite books of the week, but it was really good. And to be honest, this week's reading, the standard has been like really high, so it's not saying a lot really that it wasn't one of my favourites of the week. It's just that a few of them like kind of eclipsed it, but I really did enjoy the book, and I'm looking forward to writing my review of that one as well. Next, I read a book that contained 2 short stories plus author interviews called Roads Less Travelled. I think it's put together by Trevor Denyer, and these stories were written by Gary Couzens and Ralph Robert Moore. So yeah, I read Roads Less Travelled Volume 2, containing stories by Susan York and Rhys Hughes, which I really enjoyed. So yes, I think Gary sent this to me, so thank you very much, Gary. And I enjoyed this one as well. I would say that this is more like sort of peculiar fiction than straight up horror, both of these stories. Both have got a little bit of a horror edge, but they're quite light on the horror, if that makes sense. So the first story by Gary Couzens is called The End of All Our Exploring, and it's about a young lady that meets a guy that's a bit older than her. She's really fascinated. He seems to know things. He seems very wise. Also really good at guessing certain things, and they have a 3-year friendship which she would like to take further, and he has some reasons that are like holding him back. And I really liked this one. It was kind of weird. I kind of picked up, like, I'd say about 2/3 of the way in on what was actually happening, like what the guy's deal was, and I really enjoyed it. It was just like a strange semi-romantic little story about just people meeting by chance and where that takes them. And then the next story was called Where Did My Face Go, by Ralph Robert Moore, Where Did My Face Go by Ralph Robert Moore is what I meant to say. This one is about a particularly vain plastic surgeon that will go to great lengths to try and keep his own perfect face. It was a bit weird. I didn't really know where this one was going, and it felt a bit like I enjoyed it, but it kind of felt unfinished to me, like it ended in a weird place. So overall, when I closed this book with both these stories, I just had this sort of like unsettled, weird feeling, which maybe that was the intention of the book. The other thing I did really enjoy about it was the author interviews following the stories. So Trevor Denyer interviews Gary and Ralph, talks a bit about their stories and then about themselves as authors and stuff. So I always really enjoy like a good author interview, so I did enjoy that very much as part of the book. Next, another novel that I absolutely loved called Vanity Kills by Erica Summers. This was so good. I'm really fussy about what I call a 5-star read, and the more I read over the last few years, the fewer books I give a 5-star rating to. And I don't generally like to rate at all, but this one for me is at a minimum like a 4.5 out of 5, I would say. It's about a guy called Jack and a group of others, participants in a medical trial for a drug that is supposed to heal up scar tissue. So you've got Jack, who's got these scars caused by burns from this awful car accident he was in, and then everyone else has got like different types of scarring from different things. So we've got Mick, who is wheelchair bound after something happens with his kneecaps. Well, just the memory of reading that. So he's got these like gnarly scars on his knees. And we've got a lady, oh God, I'm so bad with character names, I can't remember anyone else's name in this book now, but we've got a lady, Iris, who's got a particularly vicious scar on her back. She had a word carved into her, and just so like varying causes of the scar tissue and types of scar tissue. And it looks like this drug works. But what is it? There are loads of twists and turns in this one. I thought the characters were really great. I could see them all really clearly. They all felt like really real people to me. I loved their interactions. The facility they're in was like a great setting. You know, like a bunch of people sort of plucked out of their normal familiar settings and put into sort of a medical facility. I loved that. Like, I actually don't normally like hospitals and compounds and like medical facilities as a setting. It's not one of my favorites, but I really enjoyed it here. The doctor that's running this experiment starts freaking out quite early on, and I really enjoyed that because it made me so curious, and it was like kind of funny in a dark way also. Yeah, this was like a whole bunch of fun, this book. It had, you know, it had like deeper themes. There was like quite a lot to think about in it, so I was quite engaged and on board with the characters and everything, quite like invested and scared for everybody. But at the same time, it was also what I would describe as a fun horror romp. So I would highly recommend that one to horror fans, especially if you like that kind of like group dynamic of strangers. It was really, really good. I loved it. The final book I read, I also loved, called These Things Linger by Dan Franklin. I have read one of Dan's other books, The Eater of Gods, which I was also really impressed with. So I was like, when I got to this one and saw it was by Dan, I was really excited to read it, and I was not disappointed. It's about a guy called Alex who was brought up by his uncle Matty, who passes away, and we have sort of like a flashback right in the beginning to Alex as a teenager doing some sort of summoning ritual with this girl Lacey that he knows from school, because her brother's died and she wants to see him again. The ritual doesn't like go well, but he always remembers that. And then when his uncle Matty dies, even though he's now, you know, moved on with life, he's moved out of the town, he has a wife called Rachel, and they've got a kid on the way and everything. He misses Uncle Matty so desperately that he suddenly remembers the summoning ritual and attempts it, but it seems like he's brought something else besides Uncle Matty over from the other side, and it was scary, man. Like, I don't often get scared. Usually I'm only really scared by Adam Neville books. I think he's pretty good at eliciting fear out of me. I get pretty spooked with Ramsey Campbell, but most of the time when I'm reading horror, even though I'm like really enjoying it, I'm hardly ever scared. But this one had a few scenes with this other thing that's come along with Uncle Matty. It's just the way it's described. It's so like uncanny valley. I was getting images of just like, you know, when you see a person but you'd refer to it as an it, kind of like It Follows. That was the vibe I got from this, from the thing. Like, it's not like an It Follows story, but that's the kind of feeling I had. So if you're a fan of that, this might scare you like it did with me. So yeah, initially Alex's wife Rachel doesn't, you know, she thinks he's having a breakdown or something, but then, you know, it becomes apparent to her. He gets back in touch with Lacey. There's this whole thing. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was like such a page turner of a story. I've been trying to read all of these in one sitting because I'm manically trying to make my way through the pile, but I had to stop and take my time with this one as well because it was really good. So I would wholeheartedly recommend that one to fans of supernatural horror. I think these have all been, apart from Roads Less Travelled, these have all been supernatural horror stories that I really, really enjoyed. The one that I'm halfway through, and I'm also really enjoying this one, is called The Woman in the Woods by S.G. McGrath, which I've never read anything by this author before, but the first thing I thought when I opened that book was, oh my gosh, how beautiful is the writing here. And then it's moved on and I'm incredibly invested in the plot so far. So yes, I'll catch up with you next, on my next catch up. It'll probably be Thursday next week again, but I might do another one sooner if I manage to get through more books over this coming weekend. Also, there will be a bonus video because, as I said, my Abominable Book Club box should be arriving at some point in the next week. So, you know, of course I'm going to do an unboxing video as well as my next reading all my requests challenge. So yeah, it's the 16th of May today. I have 44 books left to read by the end of May. I'm not sure I'm gonna do it, or if in fact I'll have anything left of a brain or eyeballs or the ability to form words. So wish me luck, because the next time I speak to you I'm hoping that I've read like 20 of them. So you know, we'll see about that, won't we? Let me know if you've read any of these books. I'd love to talk a bit more in the comments about them. These are all indie works, obviously, and I'm really enjoying indie horror at the moment. There's so much great stuff going on in indie horror. I think that this is a mix of UK and USA authors, but obviously when I write up my full reviews, I'll, you know, be able to shed a bit more light on the authors themselves. But yeah, I'd absolutely love everybody else's thoughts. I'm gonna leave it here for today, because I got some reading to do, so I gotta go. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and bleed.